You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and this is a conversation that features the one and only Chris Jericho. The reason for the conversation is to promote Chris's band, Fozzy, their tour of Australia, which is happening in November of 2018. I'm going to read out some dates. Friday the 9th, they're playing in Melbourne. Saturday the 10th, they're playing in Sydney. Tuesday the 13th, they're playing in Adelaide. And finally, Wednesday the 14th, they're playing in Brisbane. Let's have a listen to what Chris has to say. Here we go. Here he is. It's Andy Mackay-Smith calling. Chris, how you going?
Good, man. How you doing, bud?
Oh, I'm not too bad. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat to you. I've got to tell you, you're one of those blokes that's been on my bucket list for some time, and I think I've interviewed well over 300 people at this point. So it's
all right, man. Good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, and you inspired me in a way. I don't know whether you get this feedback that often, but I'll put it out there because I'm a podcaster as well, and I used to travel a lot for my job. And in between your podcast, Joe Rogan's, Jamie Jaster's, and Eddie Trunk's, I felt like you guys were with me on the road as I was traveling, getting on and off airplanes and going into strange places and hotels.
Right on. Yeah, man. Podcasting has taken over a lot of my audio time as well. I don't listen to Hank music as I used to. It's always just podcast now at this point.
Yeah. Well, I listened to an extraordinary one you did with Ron McGovney today, and I know you did it a couple of months back or a month or so back, but that guy has such humility, and I felt that your line of questioning and the way in which you were able to allow him to tell his story, because he's very much come to terms with the fact that he was the bass player in a proto version of Metallica, but there's no arrogance or nothing even approaching any sentiment from the guy is there, really. There's just, that's what I did then, and I moved on, and I've been working in a factory for the last, God knows however long it was. I don't think he gave it a time frame, but I really felt you did that interview really well. And there was another one you did a few years back with, it was a much harder one, I've got to hand it to you, with the bass player from Rage Against the Machine, Timmy Comerford. And yeah, that was a weird one, to be honest, because he was talking about waterboarding to John McEnroe.
Well, that's kind of how I run my shows. I don't have questions. I don't have anything prepared. I just kind of go with the flow. And when he mentioned something about waterboarding, I mean, we've all heard waterboarding before, but I had no idea what it was. So to have Tim Comerford, who came in to do an interview, it wasn't very talkative, which always makes me laugh. Like, if you agree to do an interview with somebody, then you know that you have to talk. That's the fucking point of the interview. Yeah. And some guys don't want to do that. So then I have to kind of go into a tactical mode of like, okay, how am I going to get this guy to start talking? I don't care what he's talking about. Just fill time for my show. And when he gave us kind of a description of what waterboarding was, then I've got a great story about, the dude from Rage Against the Machine waterboarding one of the greatest tennis pros of all time, which is probably not something that I expected to hear on my show, and probably something he didn't expect to talk about. But that's I take great pride in the fact that when you do talk to Jericho, you're not going to get asked the same questions. I mean, sometimes there's a few that you're going to get asked because I'm curious about it. I don't know the reason why this happens, but there's never going to be any dwelling on, controversy or why did this guy quit the band, or why did you, I don't want that. I just want people to come on the show and have a good time and just talk and just chat. If I meet you in a bar somewhere, I'm not going to pull out a list of questions and go, so A, B, C, and D. It's just going to be a chat, and wherever it goes, it goes.
Yeah.
And that's the natural flow, and that's what I take pride in that, because, I can always tell, because I've done so many interviews, when it's going to be a good interview or a bad interview from the first question that's asked. If someone pulls out a list of questions and starts looking, all they're thinking about is the next question. They're not listening to what's happening. And when you listen, that's when you can get the best stuff. That's when you get the stuff that guys and girls usually don't get a chance to discuss. And that makes it more fun. The guest opens up a little bit more, and then suddenly you have a great conversation going. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, indeed. And I remember when I started out a bit over 12 months ago, but to your point, I had my questions lined up, up to 10 to 15 questions or so. And I wouldn't say it was just, line up the questions and go, and disregard what the person has said. But these days, I can tell you now, mate, I don't have any pre-prepared questions outside of what I've developed mentally, and I knew you were a great conversationalist because I've listened to you so much. So there you go, yeah. And did that happen very quickly for you, like that with your podcast series? Like, did you start off with a list of questions and quickly morph based on your experience and the way you listen back to the podcast?
I mean, it was always just a conversation, more than anything. I mean, sometimes if it was someone I wasn't as familiar with, I might, research something on Wikipedia or something. And I used to do that a lot because sometimes people just wouldn't be talking. So you'd have to have some backup, material to question them with. But then after a while, I remember when I was going to go do a podcast with Tony Iommi or Hulk Hogan or Paul Stanley. Like, I don't need to do research on these guys because I've been fans of theirs for, 40 fucking years. So there's no research I can do that's going to tell me how to do an interview with Hulk Hogan or do an interview with Gene Simmons. I know these guys and I know what my experience has been with them as far as my life. So you don't need to do research on that. Now, most of the time, I won't take a guest that I don't find interesting. Actually, all the time. But sometimes those guests that I find interesting, I might not know a lot about. So then I might have to research it to at least have a little bit of a basic idea of what I might want to talk about. But most of the time, those questions go unanswered. And I always have an empty pad of paper with a pen. And then if they say something during the conversation that I want to kind of focus more on, I'll write it down.
And
then go back to it.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing.
But that's just kind of listening on the fly, yeah.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing. It's heartening to hear that somebody as professional as yourself, a lot of what I'm doing sounds like it's similar to what you've been doing, so that's good to hear. And I'll change topic because I know John's organised this chat for us to talk about your Australian tour, so I better ask a question about that because I've got actually, one question I'll ask now is how much time have we got, mate? Because I know you've only got as far as I'm aware, you've only got the 2 interviews, but if it's only 15 minutes I've got, so be it.
Yeah, I got up another 10 minutes or so.
Sweet. Okay, no worries at all. Mate, the tour down to Australia, I think it's your first time down here since 2010, if I'm not mistaken, but you must be aware that the response has been pretty good and we've been waiting with bated breath for yourself and Rich to come back down with the band.
Well, yeah, actually, we were there twice in 2013. One was on the Soundwave tour and one was supporting Steel Panther. But this is our first headlining tour since 2010, and we're so excited, man. I mean, anytime somebody asks me, what are your favorite countries to play in, I always name check Australia because we always have a great time. We've been, I think, 4 times in Australia, but to not have come for 5 years is a crime to us because, like I said, we always have so much fun when we tour down under. So to be able to come back, it's just another example of how I call it the Judas effect. The song, the album, Judas, has just taken the band to a completely different level and allowed us to play in a lot of countries that we've never played before. I'm actually in the Czech Republic right now in Prague. We've never been here before. And to return to places that's a long time coming, like Australia. So it's just kind of a whole whirlwind that's going on with Fozzy because of Judas that's paying off in so many ways, but the best ways that we get a chance to return to a lot of places or go to a lot of places that we've never been. And one of those places for us that's first and foremost is getting a chance to come back to Australia.
It's a really good point that you brought up there about Judas because I just checked before we got on the call, 21 million YouTube views. And that's effectively the chart that matters these days, isn't it? It's not the bullshit Billboard chart or what have you. It's fan engagement, isn't it? I mean, 21 million views puts you up there with some of Beyonce's stuff.
It's so crazy because it's like, we were laughing the other day about Painless, the second single that also went top 10, and it's done, I think, 3.5 billion. And we're like a little bit disappointed. And it's like the only way you're a little disappointed about 3.5 million views in 6 months is if you compare it with Judas, which is one of those songs. I don't know, man. It's the right song at the right place at the right time. It's become our Stairway to Heaven, our You Shook Me All Night Long. Name a band that Enter Sandman that has a song that everyone knows. that they equate with that band, and that's what Judas is for us. We're watching the YouTube views. I mean, Burn Me Out just came out 2 days ago, so we're checking that all the time. We're checking where Painless goes. And then out of nowhere, we hear that fucking Judas did another million on YouTube. It won't stop. And that's, like you said, that's a true gauge of, I don't know why. I wish I could write a recipe for it and tell you, A, B, C, and D. But there is no reason for why Judas is so popular. It just is, and that's all that matters. It's like we just take it with a grain of salt and be thankful for the fact that when this song came out, that people were excited to hear it, and the band was ready. I think that's the most important thing. It wasn't like we were a one-hit wonder that just had no idea how to take this success and run with it. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. We've had successful songs in the past, but now we have this calling card that everybody knows, and it just opens so many doors and just takes everything to completely different levels. And, we knew it was eventually going to happen, but now that it actually did happen, it is happening, it just makes everything that much sweeter.
Yeah, and you've alluded to something really important there, is that unlike most bands, your career trajectory, you're getting stronger after 18 years, if you don't mind me saying, and people are reacting to you very positively through that time. So you started out doing some covers, then you started releasing some really well-received original material, but it just seems to be building for you guys, doesn't it? It's quite the opposite. See, I've got a theory that most bands only have 2 or 3 good albums, but man, I would love to see what your next 2 or 3 albums are going to sound like, because I really think with the release of Sandpaper, feel free to disagree with me here, I really feel as though with the release of Sandpaper, you guys arrived.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the last 3 records of Fozzy's career, and we've had 7 total. And this is not to demean any of those other records, but you could basically take those other records and throw them away. It's the last 2 records that we've really figured out who Fozzy is as a band, what our sound is, what our vibe is. And you can see that by our set list. I mean, it's made up, the majority is from the last 2 records. I mean, there's 1, maybe 2 older songs, but what we found out is a lot of those older songs just don't fit anymore with what we're doing. Or you play a song like God Pounds His Nails, Chase the Grail was a huge song for us. And then the last time we played it, I remember after the show, I went to Rich and I was like, dude, it doesn't fit anymore. And he's like, I agree. It's gone. We're done. And, it was a great song for the time. But like you said, when Sandpaper and Sin and Bones came out, that's when the band really became Fozzy. We became who we are now as a band. And then progressing through and then working on the Judas record with Johnny Andrews, who was the producer that we decided to work with.
Yep.
He co-wrote all the songs. And then suddenly there's a third party that's involved in the creative process, which we've never had before. And sometimes that's a little bit hard to deal with. Like, who the fuck is this guy, telling us what to do? But then you realize, like, oh my gosh, like he's right. Like, this is so much better of a song because of this suggestion or that suggestion. And that was a huge step for us as well. So I think, like you mentioned, Fozzy and Johnny Andrews are now a package deal. I won't do a record without him.
Cool. Okay.
And he's crazy. We're crazy, but the end result is all that matters. And we have this amazing record that has 3 singles. And hopefully, in this day and age, for a record company to release 3 singles for 1 record is so rare. You get 1, maybe 2. If you can get 3, that's the equivalent of freaking NXS Kick in 1988 with 6 singles. We're just continuing. A lot of times they'll just shut the album down and go on and say we want a new record, but they say no, we want to do Burn Me Out now. And so it just makes everything that much better, because when we did the Judas record, we really wanted to focus on doing an album that had 10 singles on it. If the record company chose to do that, we have the songs to back it up. And so the fact that they wanted to do 3 and kind of arguing about what the 3rd single was even going to be in the first place, because there's so many great songs in the record.
Yeah.
That's a good position for a band to be.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Mate, I'll make this my last question, if that's okay. I had a really good conversation about 12 months ago with Rich about everything with the band and the wonderful success that you've had and you can look forward to. But my question for you, mate, is how would you describe your relationship with Rich? Because I imagine that you've got quite a brotherhood going on there with him.
Yeah, man, we went through our difficult period back in 2000. I don't even know, 2002, 2003. We had a couple arguments to kind of figure out who was who and what was what. But since then, 16 years, we've been on the same page. He is my brother, man. He's probably my best friend. And I might not even say that if someone said, who's your best friend? But I spend more time with the other guys in Fozzy than anybody else on the planet. I respect Rich. I'm a little bit scared of him. You know, he's one of the only guys on the planet that, you know, I'm intimidated by, because his opinion means the world to me. And you know, we rarely ever get into any arguments or disagreements. And a lot of times, you know, what we learn more than anything is when you're in a band, you let the guys do what they're best at. You know, so Rich doesn't get into my face if I'm doing press and promotion. I don't get into his face if he's talking about merch. A lot of times if we're talking about merchandise or designs, I'll just go, whatever Rich said, like if there'll be a big group chain of record company and management and merchandise, I just say, whatever Rich says, I approve. I don't even care. Like, I don't need to see the design or see what he's talking about. Whatever Rich says, you got my permission. Now leave me alone, sort of thing. And then he'll do the same for me when it comes to certain things. And that's the professional courtesy, to know that we've got two very talented individuals, two alpha males, and for us to be able to coexist and not argue, you have to have some give and take and some respect. And that's what it's all about. I'm sure it's what Mick and Keith go through, or Steve and Bruce, or Joe and Steve, or anybody that's in a rock and roll band with the two components, you know. And that's what Fozzy, you know, we're David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen. That's what we are. And, you know, let him do what he does best, and don't fuck with him, and vice versa. And as a result, it's just been a great partnership all across the board, and just leaving so much more to happen in the future because of how successful Judas was. So we're really, really excited, and we're really happy. You know, sometimes I'll just text him and go, dude, like, fuck, we did it. Can you believe it? 2 top 10 singles, you know, or whatever it may be. You know, we sold out freaking, you know, a Schaffenburg. Congrats, dude. Like, did you ever think we'd ever sell out a Schaffenburg, Germany? You know, I don't even know if you know where that is. I don't.
No, I don't.
We sold it out. So
that's
all that matters, you know. So, you know, we never take things for granted. The fact that we're able to come back to Australia after 5 years, going to New Zealand for the first time, we don't take that for granted. We don't just go, oh, geez, we got to go to Australia. It's like, holy shit, we're going back to Australia. We did it. Congratulations. And that's important, man. You have to feel that way and believe that, because you'll never get jaded, and you'll always be excited, and that just translates to the live performances.
All right, mate, I'll leave it there. Much respect to you for so many wonderful accomplishments through your career, and I certainly hope to see you and catch up with you, because I'll certainly be in the audience when you guys come to Australia.
Sounds great, man. I appreciate it. We'll see you soon. We're looking forward to it.
Thanks, mate. No worries. All the best.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Catch up. You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and you also heard from Chris Jericho, the frontman of the band Fozzy, and he's also a wrestler in his spare time. Thank you so much for listening.